application, it depends. But the main disadvantage was inefficiency, due to the fact that you can find resources application inside multi-divisional. Okay, so how to try to avoid okay, this disadvantages, trying to achieve the main advantage described in multi-divisional and plurifunctional. We can identify the matrix structure. And the matrix structure is characterized by the presence of two critical variables controlled. In particular, the matrix, inside the matrix structure, is possible to control usually an input and an output variable. Okay? So adopting this kind of structure is possible to manage and in particular to monitor two different critical variables that could be input and output. Another feature of this structure is the presence of multiple control. So this structure is characterized by a system of multiple control. Why? Because if we have to control, to monitor two different variables, for sure we need also two responsible. That's why one of the features for this structure is characterized by a system of multiple control. So, we can give a look to the organizational chart, trying to understand better the meaning of to be able to monitor two different critical variables. We say input and output. Okay? As you can see, after the top management, it's possible to identify, for example, what are this one? Design department, product department, marketing department, administration department. What are these? Functional areas. Okay? And the main goal for the functional area is to control input or output. Input for sure, okay? So, inside the product department, the main goals will be responsible as to control, for example, the production cost, raw material, direct labor, and so on. So that's why the focus is on input. So the product manager inside this structure, also in this case, control the inputs. In particular, being the production manager, will control industrial cost. Okay? But we can see that also in this organizational chart, there is another figure that is PM, PM1, PM2, okay, and so on. And this figure that is called PM usually controls another variable. That is usually the output variable, okay? But this output could be, for example, a product output. Not only product, also process output, but also a project output, okay? So that's why the main features for this structure is to be able to control minimum two variables, two critical variables that could be input and output. And how this structure is able to control two different critical variables? Introducing a responsible of the functional area, but also a responsible that is called PM for the output. That could be product, process, or project. Okay, but it depends what is the main goal for this company. Okay. How many levels, in your opinion, is possible to identify giving a look to this organizational chart? Three? Okay. Are you in accord with three or not? No other opinions? 3, 2, 4. Yeah, okay. So we are in accord that the levels are 3, okay? And can you identify the levels from this organizational chart? The first one is represented by, in your opinion, top management for sure. And the second level is represented by please try, no problem. I already said this is not the exam, okay? You're trying to identify the feature for metrics. So the second level, your opinion? Functional areas. Okay. Other opinion? No one. Please try. You say? What did you say? So at the second level or at the third level? The third level. Okay, yes. Okay, someone is saying, okay, the second level is represented by the responsible of functional areas and only by the responsible of functional areas, and at the third level it's possible to identify the PM. But no, the right answer for my question is, at the second level it's possible to identify both. So the responsible of the functional area and the responsible of the different output that could be process, product, and project. Okay? So the first level is analyzing the matrix structure is represented by top management for sure. But the second level is represented by the responsible of a functional area. Okay? Not only, but also the PM figure. Okay? And the third level is represented by these different points. Okay? In the middle, at the intersection between PM and the responsible of functional areas. And this black point is called, pay attention, two boss manager, okay? Because this manager depends by the responsible of the functional area and by the responsible of the product or the process or the project, okay? So this is the meaning of multiple control, because this manager depends by the responsible of the functional area and by the business unit manager, okay? And the two boss manager represents also the third level inside the matrix structure, okay? That's why the main feature of the matrix structure is represented by the control of minimum two critical variables, represented usually by input and by output, okay? Because the manager, for example, of the production, tries to control the input, for example, for the project 1 and for the project 2. But the project manager 1 tries to control and to monitor also the output for the project for the project 1, okay, trying to manage the different responsible of the functional areas. So the main activity for the project manager 1 is to try to coordinate the different responsible of the functional areas, trying to obtain the output that is the project 1. Okay? The same, the project manager 2, the main activities for this manager are represented by the coordination of the different responsible of the functional areas. And how to do that? Also involving the third level, represented by the two boss manager, okay? So under the two boss manager, it's possible to identify the operating employees involved in managing the project 2, okay? So the complexity arises in matrix structure for sure, because the main goal for this structure is to be able to manage two variables. The input variables that are controlled by the responsible of functional areas, and the output variables that is represented by the PM, okay? And we say that the PM could be project, process, or product manager. And we have a new figures introduced in this kind of structure that is called the two boss manager, okay? And the two boss manager depends by two different responsible that are the PM and the manager, for example, of the design department, okay? Under the two boss manager, it's possible to identify the operating employees that act, that carried out the different activities, trying to obtain the output identifying in that kind of structure that could be, for example, the computer product or the mobile product, and so on. Okay? Trying to introducing the matrix structure, you perceive more complexity, I imagine, compared to plurifunctional and multidimensional. And especially, I want to ask you, introducing a manager that depends by two different responsible. What's the main problems what is it, the main problem that we can identify in matrix structure? Please imagine you are the true boss manager, okay? And you receive the orders by me and from him, okay? And when we are not in accord, what happens? We have to ask to top management to decide, okay, instead the two different responsible. So the main problems that is possible to identify in this kind of structure is the conflicts that arise in this kind of structure. Why? Because this manager receives different orders from PM and, for example, from the responsible of design department. And if the two different responsible are not in accord, the main problem is what I have to do. Okay? So the management and the project or the development of the product stops, waiting the intervention from the top management that try to solve the conflicts inside this structure. Okay? That's why it's a very complex structure to manage. Okay? Focusing again on the output, we identify the figures that are called the PM. Okay? And we say, okay, it's possible to identify the product, the process, and the project. Focusing on project output, it's possible to identify two different metrics structure. In particular, it's possible to identify the temporary matrix, okay, when the output is based on project. When the output is based on the product and the process, the matrix is called permanent matrix. Okay? Why? Because usually the project starts and after 1 year, after 6 months, the project finished. Okay? And that's why the matrix is called temporary matrix, because usually this figure change depending on the different project. And the project could be, I don't know, bridge, different bridge, for example, or tunnels, or some different project. Or if we think to a service company, a new project could be to study a new reporting system, a new management control system. So the project starts and finishes. And we need new competencies, for example, to start a new project. That's why we identify a temporary matrix when the focus is on projects, and a permanent matrix when the focus on output is usually on the products and processes. Okay? Also because if we are in a permanent matrix, responsible usually doesn't change. Okay? But if the focus is on project, usually also the responsible could change. Okay? That's why it's called temporary matrix. Okay, so the grouping, analyzing the different organizational parameters, it's possible to define the grouping based on input and output, especially on functional areas and different output. This is the most widespread grouping that is possible to identify inside a matrix structure. But it's possible also to identify, for example, a grouping based on output. Okay? For example, a grouping based on output could be based on, for example, geographical areas and the customers. Why a company can decide for a matrix based on output? Because the main goal for this company is to be able to control, for example, a geographical area and the customers. And for example, this could be a goals or a need for a bank that needs to control the different region and the different customer. Okay? So usually the matrix is based on input-output, trying to monitor two different variable input-output, but it's possible also to identify in business world also grouping output-output, usually based on the geographical area and the customers, or geographical areas and also products, for example. We already identified the number of levels inside this structure, just to be sure that you understood the meaning. Please remember, don't be confused with the two-boss manager, okay? So the first level is represented by top management. The second level is represented by the responsible functional area and the manager of the different output, that could be product and so on. But the third level is represented by the two post managers that usually receives different orders by the responsible of the functional area and the manager of the business unit. Okay, so the third level is represented by the two boss manager. Okay, under two boss managers, it's possible to identify the fourth levels that is represented usually by operating units. Okay. Okay, now we have to describe the features of the decentralization in this structure that is very particular. Inside this structure, it's possible to identify two kinds of decentralization. Okay, why? In your opinion, why? Due to the fact that we have, for example, the responsible of the functional areas and are responsible of a particular output. Okay, so the decision-making power, for example, for the marketing responsible is only on. Do you remember? The decision-making power for marketing responsible.
Selective delegation.
Selective delegation, because this manager has only the power on marketing, sales, has the power on, for sure, on price. Okay. A sales manager has the power on cost or on revenues. Revenues, okay. And to obtain the revenues, the parameters are price, please remember, price, quantity, and if we have two products, mix. Okay? Do you remember from managerial accounting or management control? No, nothing. So, when you study revenues, during the management accounting course, you identify that revenues depends by three variables, okay? And the variables are prices, quantities, and the mix, okay? So, when I ask you, what are the powers for the sale manager or the marketing manager, please remember that the power is on revenues, okay? In particular, prices, quantity, and mix. If you want, you can add, please, but this manager has also the power on commercial cost. That's true, okay? Because, for example, this manager can decide on which kind of costs are typical from this area. Do you remember? Advertising, okay, but also the commission to be paid to the agents. You remember? Okay. Okay, so the selective delegation, okay, for the responsible of the functional areas. But for the product manager, which kind of power? Also for this one, the selective decision-making power, selective delegation. So the product manager can decide on which parameters. He is a product manager, okay? So he is responsible for the product that could be, for example, the computer, okay? So you can decide on you can decide about the price, you can decide about quantities, you can decide about mix, you can decide about industrial cost, you can decide for research and development cost. Yes, for sure. It's possible to define this delegation parallel delegation, okay? But I want to add limited parallel delegation. Why is limited this power? Can you imagine giving a look to the organizational chart? Why the power for the computer manager is limited? Okay, the focus is on the price for this computer, okay? More or less, I don't know, 500 euros, okay? This manager is free to decide the price for this computer. Yes or no? No. Why not? Because he has to discuss the price with the marketing responsible. Okay? So, the delegation is limited, the parallel delegation, because this manager has the power for sure on marketing and sales parameters, on industrial costs, on research and development costs. But this manager has to share the power with the different responsible of the different functional areas. Okay? So that's why it's possible to define the delegation for the PM parallel delegation, but limited because this power is shared with the responsible of the different functional areas. Okay? And that's why also when, for example, the computer manager is not in accord with the marketing responsible, the conflicts arise in this structure. Okay? Because I want that the price is 600. And the marketing responsible say, no, 500, and try to justify. So, how is possible to define the price if we have a lot of discussion? There is a conflict, and to solve these conflicts, usually top management takes the final decision. That is, okay, the price for this computer is 550, for example. Okay? That's why, in this kind of operating structure, when we have to define the decentralization parameter, it's possible to identify the selective delegation and the limited parallel delegation. Okay? Two different kind of decentralization and delegation. Why? Because, as we said before, selective delegation is for the responsible functional area, and the limited parallel delegation is for the responsible of the output. Limited because it's not free, but you have to discuss with the responsible of the different functional areas. Okay? Okay, about the main coordination tools, now it's clear that is due to the PM figures that is also called the horizontal coordination. Okay, so the PM represents the main coordination tool inside this structure, because, for example, this computer manager discuss the design of the computer with the design responsible. The computer manager discuss the production phases and the production activities with the responsible with the production department. The computer manager discuss with the marketing responsible the different selling strategies, and also the computer manager discuss with the administration and control the different accounting policy with this responsible. So it's possible to affirm that the coordination in this kind of structure is based on the figures PM, and this is called horizontal coordination, okay? Because the PM try to solve the problems with the different functional areas. No particular features about the staff inside this structure, because it's possible to identify both support staff and technical structure staff, but it's not a particular features of this operating structure. The management systems is based usually on profit centers that are represented by the PM. Okay. Also, the management system is based is also particular in this kind of structure, because mainly is represented by the profit center identified in a project or a product or a process. But the management system is also based on the cost centers and the revenue centers that we need to monitor, to control, because in this structure it's possible to identify also the functional areas. So this is a management control systems based on both profit and cost and revenues centers. Okay. In addition, the management control systems based on profit, cost and revenue centers, is not based only on economic and financial parameters, but is also based on time and quality control. Okay? Why? We have to add that management systems is not only based on economic and financial performance, but also on time and quality. Because if the output is the project, for example, to build a bridge, we have 10 years, 15 years. No, okay? Because the customer for that company probably imposes the time, okay? So you have to finish the bridge within 1 year, or you have to conclude the tunnel in 6 months, okay? So that's why the management control is not based only on financial parameters, but also on non-financial parameters that especially are time and quality, okay? So now we can conclude about the advantages and disadvantages for this structure. That's evident that the main advantage for this operating structure is the ability to balance different critical variables that we say usually are input-output, but could be also output-output, avoiding the main disadvantages in plurifunctional and multidivisional structure. So this is the main advantage. But, as you perceived, the disadvantages are represented mainly by the conflicts that arise in this kind of structure. Why? Because the two bus managers depends by two different responsible. So that's also natural that the conflicts are so strong in this kind of structures, because if the PM is not in accord with the marketing responsible, it's a problem, okay? And especially another disadvantage is represented by uncertainty in this kind of structure, okay? Because we don't know, so in particular the bus manager doesn't know what he has to do if the two managers are in conflict. So it's very difficult to communicate to the operating employee what they have to do. So if you want to work in this kind of company, you have to accept the conflict and the uncertainty. Okay? It's a good challenge. But it's also hard, because especially every day you have to solve conflicts between the different departments and between division and departments. Okay. Okay. These are the features and the organizational parameters for matrix structure, and also we try to better understand these features, applying what I explain now to the business case being mentioned, but after the break. Okay?